Thank you for tuning in to Androna Talks Radio, gathering as one in our sovereign truth from a galactic perspective, exploring our world with new ideas, knowledge, and a promise of a better future. Galactic discussions for galactic-minded people. Androna Talks.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on Androna Talks Radio. And today we have an interesting guest, someone who I've known for a little while, and we've had many discussions. His name is Kyle Brennon, and Kyle has an interesting background, past life, and has been used in the projects for certain things because of some of his abilities. And so he's going to talk to you about some helpful information regarding staying well and caring for yourself during this time where, our bodies are being challenged. And so without further delay, I'm going to get right into it and welcome, Kyle. How are you today?
Hi, doing well, thank you. How are you?
Very good. And we had a bit of a conversation the other night, and that led into this discussion about having you on the show today.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. So we discovered the fact that you have been used in some very special projects, and even like the Ubermensch came up as a discussion, and
Right.
and how because of that they wanted you to do certain things for them, which kind of brought us to a point of understanding yourself as like working in like medical areas or having abilities in assisting people in wellness.
Right. Yeah, that's well, for beyond, the information we've been able to uncover in our sessions and these, kind of regressions have been very new to me. I've had a lot of things in my life that have been hints maybe, or maybe breadcrumbs for me to come back into realizing that I've been involved in these kinds of programs. I do have, both my mom's and dad's side are both military, and I had a very deep. I was very much a history and a military nerd, so to say, growing up as a kid. And so these topics, as far as on a military basis, were very much something I was very much into for a long time, going in through all the way through school, and then more recently, the other end, these other breadcrumbs of being involved on the medical side I've been very much drawn to holistic medicine or traditional medicines in a way of healing myself. And a lot of people, there's different communities in the world. They go by biohackers, or it's basically the next step up of what we know as epigenetics, or what we know as adaptation, and we're able to adapt and positively mutate our genetics to express specific traits that are good for healing, or good for longevity, or good for resilience, high immune function, a balanced immune function. As you know, one of the biggest issues in the world is people's immune systems get overactive and they start attacking their own cells. And that's what leads to a lot of these major areas of disease. And so yeah, it's been really interesting. I was a collegiate football player in a previous version of myself in this life, and involving these military programs. I'm not sure when I went in and when I came back, and when I was kind of regressed back into civilian life. But as far as the healing journey that I know of, really stemmed around. I was a 275-pound collegiate football player, and playing a defensive end, and had 3 bulging discs, and basically had a choice to either heal myself naturally or get a disc fusion surgery in my lower back. And so I chose to do it naturally, and that kind of dove me into this citizen scientist role in health and wellness and nutrition. And so that really, a series of other breadcrumbs led me into more traditional medicines, indigenous medicines, both more well-known, more glorified ones like ayahuasca or other ones, but also the not so glorified ones that are found in herbalism and traditional medicines in that case. So definitely have fallen in love with the plant kingdom and also the fungi kingdom, and how supportive they are, and how supportive they've really always been for humans and coming into health and well-being. And so that's kind of where I'm at now, of just, since I think I've been on my, quote unquote path, awakening and integrating and doing the inner work since 2012 or so. And so it's just been a constant conglomeration of taking in information and finding myself meeting, people and experts in various parts of the world, living in Southeast Asia or Central America and North America. And so it's been really interesting. And so again, circling back to the conversations that we had yesterday and the conversations you and I have been, I primarily came to you because a friend of mine had gone to you for assistance with secret space program stuff, and him being involved in that. And my first initial stone to uncover started with abductions, and going through my lab's abductions as a kid, and not knowing until probably 3 years ago when it started coming up in a lot of the deeper inner work I was doing. And so I'm grateful for you for supporting me and so many of the other individuals that are kind of remembering these aspects of us, whether they are parallels or, aspects of us that have gone forward ahead of time and been regressed back, like a 20 and back program or whatever it may be. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. No, I was very, very glad to help, and I really feel that the people that come to me, we were meant to have these conversations, and to be able to uncover the things that need to be uncovered.
Right.
There's a few different pieces to this. There's your secret space program involvement, your abductions, but there's also this interesting road that you went down and how to recover. And
Right.
you made some dramatic changes. So we'll go into the health. We're going to go back and forth between health and then, of course, the secret space program experience that you had. So,
Right.
and right now, let's get a little deeper into how you figured out how to correct these things, and if you could share with some of the processes that you went through that helped you get through this, because I'm sure that there are people listening that have various challenges, and there's not telling people what to do, of course, but a lot of
Absolutely.
people are searching for alternative methods, and because of the hospitals being It's harder to get a doctor's appointment for people right
Right.
now, and
Right.
even if they do, they don't want to be in the environments where other people have contagious issues regarding
Mhm.
COVID-19. So, yeah, maybe you can kind of tell your story, and then maybe if someone's listening and they had some type of problem that was similar, maybe you can sort of help them through that.
Right. Yeah. I guess my, initial recorrections that I felt, at least on a surface level, had to do with brain trauma and the lower back injury, neuromuscular and skeletal issues that I've had. I've had, broken bones and had, cuts and bruises and plenty of concussions from being a football player. And so I discovered coming out of my collegiate football career, I was going to University of Arizona in Tucson, and I was a psychology and sociology double major, and really big into psychoanalysis. And really, I was originally thinking of going into criminal pathology, either with the DEA or with, one of the different, either a law enforcement agency or a government agency, whatever it may be. And so all of these kind of this internal work started of breaking myself down in a constructive way, so to say. And a lot of it came this initial spur of new scientific discoveries at the time were how veterans were being cured and healed from PTSD and serious traumas from basically scientific study and doses of either a psilocybin extract, a mushroom extract, or a sassafras extract, which is either MDA or MDMA. And they were having, incredible treatment opportunities for veterans. I think it was University of Southern Florida or Central Florida, or one of the Florida universities. And the big eureka moment was, I grew up in, I grew up with people telling me not to hurt my brain because my brain cells didn't grow back. And that was a limiting belief system. And it was always something that I knew once coming out of football, I would need to, find a way to heal myself. And a lot of these movies like Concussion with Will Smith and these other things were coming out where people were publicly starting to realize how much of an issue these concussions and brain traumas were. And so one of the biggest standout results of these tests where they were showing that not only were the emotional traumas being healed and integrated within the veterans, but their actual neurons and synapses were regrowing. And that was so big for me because that was, again, this hurdle of your quote unquote, your brain doesn't grow back, so don't hurt it. But when in fact our brain does grow back, it does grow, and it's a term called neuroplasticity, where we can literally alter the neurosynaptic connectivity of our brain and allow it to be used in a higher function. And that started this process of working with the psilocybin mushrooms in a conscious, ceremonial, and intentional manner. And that consciousness, which predates humans on this planet, is what really helped breadcrumb me into what I call, and what many people call, quantum biology, and being able to really see and connect the energetic properties of trauma or miasma, whether it's individual or ancestral or collective, and how that can manifest in the body through your morphogenic field, through your DNA's expression, etc. And so that's really where that was the beginning of the yellow brick road for me. And since then, it's just been a matter of just being my own guinea pig, first of all, and doing these processes myself. And going through them both on a nutritional level, even nootropic nutrition and things like that to improve bodily function and brain function, but also neurological function and reduction of stress and reduction of cortisol in the body. And throughout these 7 or 8 years, I really came to notice that all of this disease and all of the distortions of health that we experience are usually caused by your body responding in a way that is overreacting to an external path, either whether it's a pathogen or a virus or whatever it is, even just a parasite, a bug, and the body overreacting. But that overreaction only happens really when our immune systems are compromised. And other than that, our bodies can handle themselves. They're very capable. So as long as we foster and nurture our immune system, as well as how many other bodily systems really fit into that, and that includes your microbiome and your gut flora, and those even your level of consciousness, I believe, really allows you to be more adaptive and more resilient to exterior factors or interior factors, things that you may be purging within yourself. And so a lot of these processes either were intuitively brought to me, or my true guides were supporting me in that. And one of my favorite processes is the command statement process, where there are layers of belief and perception that you need to transcend, and realize that whether you believe that you're a soul or an infinite being of consciousness in a human body, or you're a body with a soul, those are things that are definitely big variables in overcoming these limiting belief systems and really taking charge of our body. And the command statement factor was so big for me, because I was coming into my own empowerment as an infinite being of consciousness living in human form, and basically commanding and talking to my body, and making, it's almost like a mixture of command and affirmative prayer at the same time, where you're affirming something to the universe or affirming something to your universe within you. And that is then, because of your free will and intention, the entire universe is bending or changing at that will, and that especially the change of perception, but then the change of perception and knowing you have power over your own health, and you're not just a victim of exterior, interior circumstances. And that those are really key factors for me that really led into these major healing processes that I was able to go through.
I think that in order for any type of change to happen in a person's life, you have to get past the limited belief systems.
Right.
And because those are pretty much drilled into our thinking from an early age.
Right.
And I'm not saying, we all need to be Superman and start jumping off of buildings and all this other stuff.
No.
But it's funny because we did talk about the Superman project.
Right.
That was somehow connected, and that super soldier that just came in, was in the news. But I'm not going to divert and go over it, because I have a tendency to go off topic. But it's sort of the way my brain works, I guess, to help me sort things out.
Nonlinear brain function.
Right. So, but essentially, this is the foundation. So you can go to any specialist in the world, but if you are retaining this limited belief system, then it will get in your way. It will literally block the effect of what you're trying to accomplish. Right. And very likely, a lot of people undermine the strong beliefs that reside in the subconscious, mm-hmm. that have a very powerful effect on our thinking. And right. even though, in our conscious mind, we say, well, all right, we're changing this. But if it resides in the subconscious, and this is why I do a lot of this work, and I know I don't do a huge amount of, variety of all these different people doing regressions. I have specific people for the show, for the show, to explain some of the things that they have. But I will say that I've done a ton of work in regressions and personal regressions for myself and others. And it is amazing the wealth of information that resides in the subconscious, but it is also one of the most fragile places that of the human mind.
Right.
And it is the place that is mostly influenced in early childhood. And so those that had specific type of positive affirmations regarding who they are and their expression of what they just of being who they are as a person, their achievements, and what they believe about themselves according to what people have told them, and all of that. And also, oh, don't jump, you can really hurt yourself. Don't do this. All of these type of things are there, right?
Right.
And so, I don't know why, and I'm not going to compare myself to what you've done. And I came from an athletic family, and my son played collegiate baseball as well. I was a gymnast when I was younger. I'm not saying I was very good, but I was one of those kids that I just would do all sorts of like crazy. I have stories. Did some really crazy things, because I didn't have any fear, and that whole thing without having any fear, and because of that, I really believe that's part of the reason why I never got hurt. I never broke anything.
Right.
And I did, like I said, I don't know, I flipped over bikes going down a hill, and it's a rollerblade going down the street, and jump on cars to stop ourselves. And we did some really crazy stuff growing up. And as a lot of people were like that, where I grew up. I was near Cambridge and Harvard, and in that area in Massachusetts and Boston area, people just, I don't know, there was just something about it. And I remember, just going in the backyard trying to flip and just banging my head and doing all sorts of things, and getting up and dusting myself off, and people just looking at me, and just like I didn't think anything of it.
Right.
I'm pretty confident. I mean, you could say I was whatever I was. I don't know, other than the fact that I just felt like I wasn't supposed to get hurt, and I believe that does affect us. I also believe that people don't have to get the virus. I also believe, I'm going to go a step further, that whatever damage might have already been done doesn't have to stay. So when we're told that we're already affected by all these like nanoparticles,
right,
I don't believe, I honestly don't believe that we can't remove it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree 100%.
So, and I haven't met too many people that are really, really solid in this expression. I haven't met too many, because and you can see exactly where their limitations are when they start to talk. And I'm not saying that, we're fearless and we're going out and we're going to expose ourselves to all sorts of things. It's not about that either.
No, yeah.
It's realizing that you are. It's also a feeling that connectedness to the universe, of knowing that you're supposed to be here at this time for this purpose. You're supposed, and that goes for everyone. Every single person has an intrinsic value.
Absolutely.
And it's not because, hey, we're super soldiers, so we're more important than someone else, or we come from an elite family, we're more important, or we had all this education that makes us more important, or I have this specific ability that I can do this, and that, it's none of that. Every single one has an equal value.
Absolutely.
In the eyes of the universe. And that's not my opinion. I honestly believe this is true. And I think that you can see, if we all have a spark of the divine, then we all have this innate ability and purpose for being here. And I feel for these people who say, well, you have this gift, I can't do anything. That's completely wrong.
Right.
Completely
Yeah.
wrong, but it's actually based on an earlier belief system
Yep.
that
Absolutely.
they accepted something about themselves that they didn't feel the self-worth that they were supposed to, but very likely the person that was raising them or whatever had their own insecurities as well. So that sort of trickles down.
Right.
And
Right. And that developmental psychology aspect of having somebody else's limited belief systems being projected onto you, and your younger self making it your reality because, oh, this is my parent or this is my teacher, they must be right, and then that becomes, a fallacy within yourself that ends up being, it's like different parts of you are in conflict because there's a part of you, your true essence, that knows that was never true, even from the first time you heard it, whether you heard it when you're 2 years old or 20 years old. And then there's a part of you that, was not secure and aware of your potential, and believed what people said. And that, I think, especially involving health and wellness, this is a huge, massive issue with it's not necessarily an issue, but, just like everyone is meant to be here who's here right now. Everyone is meant to be learning the lessons that they're learning for them to come into their own empowerment and make changes within themselves. And so the health and wellness aspect of this is so huge. It's an absolutely pivotal process. And that's what I really enjoy about herbalism and natural medicines. It's something that you teach yourself and you empower yourself for life. You can, remember it. And it's not something, I used to be a health coach and used to actually coach people on this, but now it's just become more of, I just share, when my intuition tells me to share. And because in some of these, some of the sources, and it's like you have this backlog, this archive of all of these resources, and you don't even remember where you read it or what you read. It just comes to you, like you were talking earlier, how your brain works in a nonlinear process. Well, that random access memory is the same way, where it's completely nonlinear, and you just go, oh, you're having this issue. Oh, maybe take a look at this, or maybe try this, or whatever it is. And again, and it's going back on what you said earlier as well. It's not about telling people what to do. We're moving out of the age of, we have moved out of the age of hierarchy and gurus and things like that. And this is all about collective empowerment and collective intention, and everybody taking that personal responsibility, personal responsibility for themselves.
absolutely. Now let's go back to your so you here you are, well, you're tall, right? So your height
Right.
is
Around 6'3", 6'4".
okay. And then you had, a lot of 275 pounds.
Right.
I'm assuming there's quite a bit of muscle there as well, because you're, you have to be physically fit and strong when you're playing
Right.
football.
Right. Absolutely.
And then, aside from the brain injury, I think you changed your diet quite a bit.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The nutrition factor was really big for me. I mean, in our nutrition programs, we would need to eat between 5,000 and 6,000 calories a day to, around the 5,000 calorie is maintaining your body weight. And then around the 6,000 is where you get up to still continuously putting on mass, putting on in the form of strength and muscle mass and things like that. So a lot of eating, and very much a omnivore of eating everything. Fortunately, I grew up in Southern California, where we have amazing food, a lot of different ethnicities to offer. But coming out of collegiate sports, and while I was at Arizona, my whole house, all 5 of us roommates, started a ketogenic or keto diet or nutrition program, and that was really helpful at first. That was really my first official nutrition program outside of football. And it involves basically, this is something that I would recommend more for men. It seems to be more of a variable for women, whether it works or not. And it has to do with women having different hormones or their bodies being set up differently and differently on a genetic level, even varying from woman to woman on how they metabolize fats. And so the ketogenic diet, I can say, has at least been very useful for a lot of men, and it was something that we were all doing, and that's kind of where it started. And then within a couple years, I was shifting more into a plant-based diet, and that was primarily for looking back, primarily for having a nutrition regimen that was not inflammatory. And of course, like a lot of people in the plant-based communities, whether they're vegan, vegetarian, or whatever, I don't necessarily like using the V words just because it carries a lot of stigma. And I'm basically just eating what my body tells me to, without needing to put a controlled stigma over it. But people can be people can be quote unquote vegetarian or vegan, and be what a lot of people call Doritos vegans, where they're not eating meat, but they're eating absolutely terrible products still. And so there's a process that the body needs to go through, besides having a Doritos vegan diet or a plant-based, more health-oriented diet. Even that transition, the whole internal structure and metabolic processes in your body need to be changed, and whether it's a part of epigenetics or whatever it may be, everybody's body is set up differently, but there needs to be a healing of the gut, especially whether it's the gut flora that are in your body, and the microbiome that you're cultivating within yourself. And if your body is like a planet, then you have inhabitants, and many of those are your own cells, and many of them are third-party bacteria. And so very much cultivating symbiotic bacteria, purging and cleansing your body of any non-symbiotic or parasitic bacteria, and healing what are called your villi in your intestines, which are like little fingers. And so through the villi, instead of just having a tube by itself, the villi extending out of your stomach, almost like a sea anemone, but a little bit shorter than a sea anemone, how their little fingers are. But that whole surface area of each finger becomes a absorption point instead of just having a tube. And so what a lot of people have an issue with is, because they've eaten processed foods, because they've eaten GMO foods or foods with pesticides, one of the biggest arguments of pesticides is, they think it's okay because humans don't have the receptors, or they don't have the specific structures within their anatomy that actually cause issues with pesticides, but all of our microbacteria and our microbiome does. And so by consuming food with pesticides, you're essentially nuking your own biome, and that can leave room for issues with immune function, issues with digestive function, and there's a whole chain reaction that happens. But going back into healing the villi and propagating and cultivating a healthy biome are essential to any nutrition program, regardless of what you're eating, to actually get the full absorption and processing of that food within your body. You need to heal the villi and get a good microbiome And there's, different plants, different herbs you can use for that, different choice in medicinal mushrooms. Not all mushrooms are magic at this point, but some are hallucinogenic and some are magic in a way that helps your body heal. And so there's a way of feeding your gut flora and reintroducing healthy gut flora through things like kombucha or probiotics. And then to heal the villi, aloe is very, very good for that. And you can just blend it into shakes. There's a lot of aloe supplements out there, but obviously straight plant matter or straight aloe, and just taking it off of the leaves that it has, and just putting it into a shake is really, really helpful for the microvilli. And aloe basically works similarly as it does on your outer skin. It works on your inner skin as well, or the inner surfaces of your body, and can really help the villi heal. And so this whole process of nutrition for me really helped it started on an internal level, and then really elevated and escalated as I started, expanding my consciousness and just being guided, and my consciousness basically just cutting out things, very quickly. It's like your body has a knee-jerk repulsion for certain things. It's just like, nope, I'm not going to put that in my body, because you're listening to your body. A lot of people are eating out of thought patterns and reactions and cravings that are not actually coming from their body. They're coming from candida and other parasitic bacteria or parasitic microorganisms. So they're essentially kind of being puppeted. And so, there's of course times when a part of you, whether it's your inner child or, you're wanting to have fun and have a pizza party or whatever, but, there's a major part of you, once you get your consciousness continue to expand and continue to align in optimal well-being. And that was my motto: optimal health, optimal well-being. And I had no idea what that even looked like. I don't even think science knows what that looks like, but that has been kind of my goal, my path. And so finding anything that will support that, the manifestation of my physical body and non-physical bodies and optimal well-being is really where the underlining, motivation and the goal really is.
So you began by changing your diet. You began looking into some of these herbs, and keep in mind, I mean, people underestimate herbs. They're absolutely everything that we need on this planet is available to us already in the ground.
Right.
I mean, we've underestimated, and what the resources that are right at our fingertips. And even, some people, like, we get rid of what we perceive as weeds, like dandelions. I see people talking about dandelions. I ate them as a kid. My mother used to make them with like olive oil and garlic and the whole bit, and we ate a lot of that kind of stuff. Very leafy green vegetables, and a lot of people like, oh, that's like peasants' food. I mean, people are starting to rethink that whole idea, because the ones that are really doing well are the ones that have figured out to just stick with the basics. And anything that was, and I am definitely not where you are right now, Kyle. Honestly, I hate to admit it, but I was a little bit of that burrito vegan for a while, or the Dorito vegan.
Dorito vegan.
Yeah, a little bit,
It's
not 100%, but it's
so
like
a lot of us go through that.
Yeah. So, and I don't know, I had 1,000,001 excuses that I just kind of, I was stressed, or I had this and that, it's easy, or whatever, but so I can relate to both parties. I mean, everyone knows I'm not, waif thin. So, I've cheated. You have to be truthful about things. I had but, at some point your body says, what are you doing, and why are you doing it?
Right.
And so, still dealing with a lot of the information that comes through. I have to deal with people with incredible sorrow and pain and frustration, They're getting attacked. I get very worried about them. And honestly, it comes out in poor eating habits sometimes and
Right.
stress. And so, yeah, I try to work, I need to take better care of myself. I know if I want to be able to help people, but I do know how to do some of that, but not to the extent that you do. And I started to research a lot of different things, and I do read up on a lot of wellness, uh, issues, the ways to better enhance my physical body. I have been doing kombucha, and I think it was the black walnut was
Hmm.
also something that would help,
Right.
and also I think it was pumpkin seeds or something that get rid of some things in your stomach. So,
Oh, awesome.
but they have to be raw, I guess,
Right, right,
in order to be
exactly.
effective.
Raw, that's the core scientific backing of the raw food movement is you're getting the full all the essential vitamins and minerals that are coming from that food, but also you're getting the probiotics that are actually feeding off of that food. And then you are essentially bringing in those probiotics into your system.
So what about yogurt? Yogurt that has, there's no sweetener in there. There's no extra stuff. It's pretty much organic, but it
Right,
is still dairy.
right.
What's your
And
opinion on that?
so the one animal product that I do eat regularly is goat yogurt.
Hmm.
My body seems to, you know, with cow's milk, I sometimes get kind of phlegmy, and it really responds to my mucous membranes a lot.
Hmm.
And goat yogurt doesn't. It doesn't have the same effect, and also sheep. And I like goat cheese and sheep cheese as well.
Yeah.
But the probiotics that they utilize in those yogurts are very beneficial. I'd say I'm just a big fan of goats. They're the only farm animal that does eat the dandelions and does eat, they'll eat what the other ones don't. And that makes them very resilient. And they're a very interesting animal. And they're, incredibly resilient because they eat the things that the other animals won't. And that includes specifically the bitters, the herbs and the weeds that are very bitter. So I do have kind of a bias towards goat products over other dairy products.
Yeah.
But
The cow definitely has, a lot of people have a problem with anything dairy.
right,
And
right,
yeah.
absolutely, yeah, and that's the thing is that when you're thinking about milk, we're ingesting a substance that was created for another animal. And so, for us to be, and I used to drink, my past self used to drink tons of milk. I grew up with that, milk builds strong bones and that all that stuff. And, it really affected my weight and specifically the hormones that are in it, because, cow's milk is to get a baby cow to turn into a full size cow very quickly. And obviously different number of stomachs for one thing, but different amount of enzymes and processes through which cows can digest on top of the hormones being specifically for baby cows. And so that goes with all milk of all different animals. And it has been, used very successfully in a lot of cases. However, I think it's really interesting that there's such a wide, a broad amount of people that are having issues with dairy right now. And whether that is the health of the animals, and commercial dairy farms
Yeah.
are absolutely terrible. So there may even be amounts of, and this goes with the meat as well, there's high amounts of stress hormone and cortisol and things like that are in the animals, in the products that we consume. And that's what's so important about sourcing from sustainable, conscious, and sources that are actually treating their animals right. Like my partner's father, for example, he very rarely, literally, extremely rarely. They're from Nebraska, so huge beef state. But he only eats the cows that come from his family farm. And it says a great amount to his health and also his family's health. They've been farmers for generations there, and his ancestors have lived well into their 90s and 100s. And so, there are things to be said about different people being set up differently for the food that they eat. I've heard of and seen cases where people are healed from cancer from raw vegan diets and raw vegan nutrition. And I've also seen cases where people were healed from cancer from raw meat. And that only one case was a gentleman who was a indigenous Native American. And so I thought that was really interesting, coming out of this, a lot of the blanket statements of veganism and et cetera, of that being kind of the only way to reach optimal health. But, people having different responses in their biology based on their ancestry. And, that ancestry has a huge deal to play in this whole nutrition aspect. And even what we crave when we get, when we're deficient in something, our body has a specific product that it usually goes to, and that can oftentimes be ancestral. And so if people are, low in iron, they'll go for red meat, or people are low in calcium, they'll go for milk, or, whatever it is. So there's definitely a lot of ancestral programs and patterns brought into, from our ancestors into our DNA that are kind of just auto responses. And part of this awakening process and the expansion of consciousness, you are mutating your DNA in a way that is beneficial for your consciousness. And I believe that that's when you start seeing these shifts in the cravings and where, like you said earlier, your body at some time will override the situation and go, okay, I've had enough of this. You're just going to keep getting sick until you figure this out. So until then, have fun being sick. But when you want to get your stuff together, then I'm ready and let's do it.
Absolutely. And I think that what I like about you, Kyle, is that you are telling people to work with your own individual way of healing or way of eating. Because
Right.
if you start telling everyone they can't eat this or they can't eat that, who are we to say? I'm not talking about unhealthy things. I'm saying is their preference. Or some people
Right.
feel like they want to have meat. Some people feel like they want to eat a lot of grains. Whatever, some people eat a lot of rice,
Right. Absolutely.
and you could look at any of those things and just tear them apart and say how bad they are for you. But I like the way that you framed it. Some of it's related to ancestral and how certain bodies react to different things.
Right.
And so, but either way, you want it to be somewhat untainted from the horrible chemicals and of course with chemtrails, like I said, we had this goes into another aspect of intention,
Right.
of protecting our food and the things that we ingest. And like you said, you talked about these people that lived on a farm, and for about 7 years or so, I lived in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
And well, if you include, I lived in Oklahoma for a couple of years, so it's probably a total of 9 years. And then I lived in Nebraska for about 7. And so the same thing, like you said, that's the same region. It's farm country. The thing that bothered me about farm country is all of the chemicals that they would put down.
Right.
And you would smell them. You could just feel the energy of them.
Right.
It was really obvious, and it was unfortunate because those fields are beautiful, and you see these beautiful cornfields and bean fields and lovely farms and the animals and so forth. It's a beautiful landscape out there, and it's a variety of different types of landscapes. It's like a few different. Some is more city. Some they have those hills, the sand hills, and all that stuff. And then it actually starts looking like Wyoming or something
Yeah.
towards out west.
Yeah. Great. The
Uh,
Great Plains.
yeah. So, but essentially, I learned organic gardening out there, and learned to not work with any chemicals, and learned, like I said, this compatible planting with herbs and flowers, adding it to the garden, and
Right.
trying to work with different things that would produce. There's nothing like vegetables grown by yourself,
No.
and the reward of going out to pick them, and it seems like the flavor is not lost
Right.
through shelf life and transport, and there's nothing else like it.
Right.
And
Absolutely. And that's a key thing with food too. I mean, they've come out with different studies or different ways to measure this, but a lot of what food is about is beyond the actual chemicals and minerals. There's an energetic exchange. They're called either biophotons or photonic light that those plants were using, that are both coming from the ground, from the sun, from the earth mother herself, and from the sun, that they were creating it. And so the longer a food is off the vine or off the tree and on a shelf, the more those biophotons are reduced. And so essentially people could be eating organic food, but it can still be dead food. And it can still be very low in those biophotons. And so and then going also back onto the chemtrail part is, we don't have no idea where the most of it's, I mean, most of it, depending on the time of year, is grown in the US or Mexico or whatever. But another aspect of the nutrition that, and more so just my relationship with food, had to do with praying for my food every time I ate. And even in that process, praying for and thanking the farmers for farming it, even the elements who helped create that food and nourish that food, the truckers that brought it, the people who harvested it, the people who boxed it, the grocery store workers, thanking everybody in that supply chain. And also asking that, I've only done it a couple, I only actually think about this usually when I'm eating something that is not the best thing for me to be eating, but I pray on it and ask that any kind of toxins or anything that is not benefiting my body can be removed, or very quickly and easily pass through my body without affecting me. And in that case, that extra amount of intention is added to that. And I feel, from being being involved in healing and knowing the kind of energy that your body can produce, if you're have your hands over your food and praying for it, you're putting a lot of energy into it. And I at least feel you can maybe substitute and supplement some of those biophotons that you lose in the harvest and shelf life process, and you kind of restore that food to its natural vibrancy on an energetic level.
I think that's a great idea, because yes, we're as pure as we try to be. Or there are some people that really, they, first of all, the cost increases with organic foods, and right now in some areas it's a little bit more scarce.
Right.
People, we talk about people, how do you prepare for, say, if they extend this time period where people are in lockdown, how to prepare and always have some food available in the event that anything does happen, because we are still in some unsettling times. We need to be realistic about it. I'm not being
Right.
into any fear, because we know that we can get through it. But
Absolutely.
it's just a good idea to have your little, some of the things that you need. And I talked with Miguel Chesler about this as well, and how to prepare for some of these situations. But it's not to be afraid. but to be sensible about it, you know.
Right.
We're getting to a point where we're becoming self-sufficient, and embrace it. Embrace that you have the things that you need. So, what do you suggest? How do people prepare for long term if they don't have access to a store?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, finding organic seeds. A lot of companies are still doing delivery, and you know, sending things by mail. So you can go on websites and find heirloom vegetables, or you know, heirloom seeds are fantastic if you can find them. If you can find organic fruits and vegetables. You can, you know, very easily. For example, I shop at like Natural Grocers or Fresh Thyme, or that's basically it now. And on the West Coast, I shopped at Mother's Market in California, which I love. But a lot of these stores sell seeds, and if not, just find them online. And of course, have a, you know, sensible vetting process of who you're buying it from. But you know, a lot of these the heirloom seeds will be great genetics, and you know, there's a lot of online material that you can use to build your wisdom and knowledge of farming, organic farming at home. And there's even systems you can buy for vertical gardens that go inside of your house, which are, I think, are pretty awesome. You're obviously not going to have the same kind of microbiome and the symbiotic fungal and microbiome like you would if you're planting in the ground, but you're still having fresh food, and it's actually, you know, in some cases a little bit more easier for people, meaning they're not, you know, tilling and going through the garden, or they just have these little pods. They basically sell them as towers. There's also a company called Pyramid Farms, which sells little pyramids and big pyramids, and they're basically very easy little setups you can do and grow your own food. Something that I've recently, a lot of people that I'm really inspired by, at least forward thinkers of the previous century, were people like Wilhelm Reich and Rudolf Steiner and Victor Schauberger, as well as Nikola Tesla. And each of these individuals just had really interesting perspectives, and I don't take, you know, I never take on everything. If I'm looking at someone's teachings, I don't I didn't say I would never really take on everybody's information, but I just filter it, and I, you know, see what works for me, what resonates with me. And that led me into looking into like what's beyond organic farming. What can we do to really transcend even what we think is organic? And that especially has to do with increasing the the nutrient density of your food. And so one of those that I've recently been getting into is called Korean natural farming, and it's a type of I guess you could say natural farming that utilizes the resources around you, and you can also buy certain things in stores to help you create and make your own gardening additives, whether they're soil additives or fertilizers, or basically teaches you how to do this all yourself. And there's an awesome gentleman on YouTube named Chris Trump, not related, and he is, I think he's out of Idaho or Idaho, and he also works on works with a farm commercially in Hawaii, and he's one of the major teachers and major really masters of Korean natural farming, and you can find all of his stuff on YouTube. He goes into great depth and literally shows you how to do everything, and you can make your own anything, you know, anything that you need within the Korean natural farming system. And Korean natural farming is based upon collecting and cultivating indigenous microorganisms from your environment. And there's a way of, sampling it. So going out to the forest, getting samples, and then bringing it back, and then utilizing the indigenous microbiome from that forest to create new products and create additives and use that in your soil. And then that brings basically that kind of symbiotic system of the fungal and microbiome networks of the forest into your garden, and allows your garden to work like a whole system and not just a little island surrounded by whatever else is around you. And then another thing that really I found really interesting was Paul Stamets, who is a more recently well-famed mycologist out of the Pacific Northwest. He has a couple of really, brilliant Joe Rogan interviews and TED Talks, and this guy is I resonate with him a lot because he too was really activated in his purpose by the use of medicinal mushrooms for his own healing. And that really aligned him and supported him and also helped him learn, because again, if you're using these kinds of things consciously, you're communicating with a consciousness that predates humanity on this planet and has a lot to offer as far as wisdom and sharing. And especially when you're with the intention of learning about symbiosis and how all life forms are interconnected and can live symbiotically with each other. And they just came out, Paul Stamets and the group that he works with, they just came out with a movie called Fantastic Fungi. And it is an amazing movie. I just bought it a couple days ago. You can either buy it or rent it. And I can send you those links as well if you'd like to post them. But they go over some really amazing illustrations of the up-to-date science on how crucial mushrooms and fungal networks are to the rest of the world, to any ecosystem, and how even fungi are responsible for cultivating the right kind of microbiome, where they literally choose just like we choose by what we eat and what we consume. We choose what biome we have and purge what we don't want. The mushrooms also do that on a moment-to-moment basis, and so that's also a really awesome. Just tidbit of information, not a tidbit, quite a bit of information, but things that people can look into. And if they want to get into gardening, they can really pan out and see just how much their gardening and their garden, especially if they're doing it outside, is interconnected with this greater web of life.
I think that's fascinating. You kind of brought up a few different things that made me think about. One was permaculture. And
Right.
the other one was how the Korean diet incorporates kimchi a
Right.
lot, or
Absolutely.
what do you call it? I was going to say
Microbiome.
Yeah. So they were all very mindful of gut health, and so, but I didn't know about them bringing mushrooms in that way, and that really resonates with me. It seems like this is, the very things that we're always quick to get rid of is kind of what we should be incorporating, because
Right.
it's in nature, and nature is pretty much guiding our way. And I guess the concept of permaculture is that plants should not be planted the way that we interpret them, but in a way that makes them happy.
Right.
If, there's certain things they like to grow next to, and they don't necessarily grow in lines.
No. And they have different interactions between each other, and again, utilizing, permaculture is, creating a garden, a botanical garden that is a food forest at the same time, and making sure that the right plants are close to each other or far from each other, depending on how they work with each other.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be learned, but this is some of the old knowledge rather
Right.
than new knowledge. But we have to keep relearning things
Right.
due to these multiple resets that they keep putting humanity through, and losing and not appreciating our older, whether it's ancestors or our elders, and learning some of the things that we should be learning. Some of us have lost, parents, grandparents at a younger age, so you trying to hold on to some pieces of information that just doesn't exist anymore. But
Right.
the world, we look at all the different cultures around the world, and everyone has some very interesting information, and we see them always through the eyes of perspective of politics and what they represent politically and what we've been told they represent to us, which creating these biases and prejudice and whatever. And that is deliberately done to block us from actually embracing the many similarities that we have with one another,
Right.
and also just the people in general, that we're all needing to or wanting to survive and thrive and to do well, and to achieve our goal of helping our children, and embracing what is beautiful in this world.
Right.
And as we're constantly just trying to assert ourselves in a planet right now that is not listening to the people, but essentially doing their own thing and imposing and creating this slave system situation. So we have to be louder, we have to be bolder and stronger, and we have to support one another in
Right.
this quest of remembering that we belong here. We're here for a purpose and intention, and that we should care for ourselves so
Right.
that we can help others, and that we can, thrive in these environments right now that where we're really being challenged. But I think in some ways, the challenge might make us more agile, might make us more alert and
Right.
aware of the things that we need, that are really necessary. So there's so many different things to look at, and of course I will definitely like to have those links.
Yeah. I'm
And
making a list to send you.
yeah, yeah. And so giving people as many tools as they need. Remember, like, I'd like to give people what they call a toolbox.
Yeah.
And there's, for one person, this is valuable information. Another person, they're not ready to hear about it, or they have some other ideas that really work well for them.
Hmm.
And so and that's fine too. We just kind of be here to support everyone. And if whatever piece of information really helps you, then that's perfect. What about stress? What's the best thing do you suggest regarding food or supplements in stress?
Right. Stress is, it's a very interesting topic because each of us, I mean, there's general metabolic processes that each of us share that are reactions to stress, but some people are more prone to stress in different variations, different levels. Like loud music stresses me out, because it's just like abrasive, but situations like survival situations or high pressure situations are things that I thrive in. There's things that I've, was playing in front of 20 plus thousand people in high school football, at Angel Stadium. And, that seems like a lot of pressure, but after you can perform in that kind of pressured situation, then there's these other contrasts of going, oh, wow, if I could handle that, then I can handle this, And so, one of my biggest injuries that I had was in Bali. And I had a 10 millimeter thick piece of untempered glass shatter from a door and like guillotine the top of my forearm and cut my arteries in half and cut my tendons in half, and I lost function of my four fingers immediately. and had a very interesting day of, going from shopping on a Saturday morning to, waiting 6 hours in a hospital and having artery clamps to keep me alive and keep me from bleeding out, and then healing through that. That healing process was absolutely crucial in my path. Again, to overcome, or not to overcome stress, but to adapt in a way where I disallowed myself from having, stress come up in challenging situations. So when after this armed thing, when I had another injury, it was cakewalk compared to that. It was like I'd already been through so much that it almost made it easy. So not easy, it's still stressful and still traumatic, but better, easier in some cases. And during this time in Bali, I was really, super focused on herbs. In Asia, they're obviously very well available. And, there are herbs, specifically tonic herbs. In Chinese medicine, they're called tonic herbs. And part of those tonic herbs and some others are called adaptogenic herbs. And those kinds of herbs basically support your body in not coping with stress, but handling it in a different way. Coping is, for me, I don't know, it just seems like a different coping is almost like, I'm not sure. Yeah, no, but basically helps your body adapt to stress differently, hence the word adaptogenic. And so usually that has to do with cortisol production, stress hormone, and stress hormones are catastrophic for many other parts of our body and other systems, and especially other hormones. So there are herbs available that both reduce, that can reduce cortisol in your body and reduce your body's production of cortisol. And those are definitely, I mean, we live in a day and age where we can get almost any herb on the planet delivered to our house, which is unprecedented and fantastic. So I would definitely, if you're wanting to look into stress reduction, the adaptogenic herbs and adaptogenic mushrooms are very helpful for that. And there's, often there's also other tonic herbs that are called nervine herbs. And so combining the adaptogenic mushrooms with the nervine herbs, and the nervine herbs specifically focusing on nerve function, and using those in tandem can be very helpful for reducing stress, but again, also helping your body and your system build up a resilience to where specific stimuli that would previously stress you out has a different response to your body. And eventually I feel we grow out of, going into fight or flight, for example. There's just an immediate kind of like, this needs to get done. Stressing about it is only going to hurt me. So, there's this override process that our bodies kind of mature through. Let me see what else.
I've used ashwagandha.
Yes, ashwagandha is fantastic. And ashwagandha is a great example of an herb that improves and is really good for reduction of cortisol and helping your body stopping the pendulum swing of how much cortisol you're producing. Either you're totally okay, or you're full on fight or flight. Adrenal glands are bursting, and ashwagandha is fantastic for that.
Yeah. So Jesus, there's so much here. So we started looking, and now based on all of this information, you go through this whole journey. Now you've even helped to heal this injury that you had. It was one of those things where you said that they didn't have the right they had a type of glass over there, and when you went to open the door, that you threw it open a little bit too strong. And right. And then at that point, that's where the accident happened. So of course, you had to go to the hospital to get this worked on. But as far as the healing process, what did you do to help yourself heal quickly?
I mean, it was, a combination of, as soon as I was able to unwrap it, take my dressings off for the first time, I did drench my arm in essential oils like clove oil and frankincense and oregano oil. And because I was at the time, again, living in Indonesia and having a massive open wound, and they did a fantastic job of stitching me up and, putting my tendons back together, obviously putting my artery back together. And then a lot of it had to do with continuing to eat healthy, and continuing to, I was supplementing specific nutrition aspects to build my red blood cells. So getting a lot of things. For one of the best things is coconut water. Coconut water is, very. I mean, it's been used in some cases. I think in World War II, where they were literally, they could replace it with an IV, or you could, replace it with saline. But coconut water is very, very much, really, really just an incredible elixir of life for the human body. And so I was drinking a lot of coconut water. I was eating cacao, raw cacao specifically, and just taking blood building, different herbs or different nutrition for blood building. I was also taking ashitaba, which is a longevity herb. I was also taking different medicinal mushrooms and herbs for healing, longevity, etc. And I was doing a lot of it kind of going back to the command statements I talked about earlier. There's this override where your consciousness is like you're present in your body, you're grounded and embodied in your human body, and you're basically commanding yourself to heal. And so I didn't do any physical therapy because I was actually, after the accident happened, basically the Saturday the incident happened with my arm, that next Saturday, Bali went under like a stage 3 or stage 4 alert for a volcanic eruption. And so we literally had to leave the island as soon as possible. And we ended up flying into Chiang Mai, where we lived in Thailand for a month before coming back to the United States. And by the time, it was actually, I think, around 5 weeks. But by the time I had actually come back from Thailand, I was pretty much, I felt like I was 60 to 70% back to function with my arm. It took about 3 months for me to be in full function, where I was literally picking up suitcases with that arm, writing, doing everything fully functional. And that's something that most doctors could not believe was possible, especially with the cutting of the ligaments, or the tendons rather. And I felt like being like, if you're Pinocchio and your strings were cut and you literally could not move. And going from that to being fully functional in 3 months was pretty astounding without any physical therapy or any of that. And that was initially one of the bigger spiritual lessons that I needed to learn. Anytime things like this happen, I immediately will go to the intuitives that I work with or my mentors and ask them, and ask for their assistance in supporting me and seeing what metaphysical properties were in the works of causing that to happen. And one of those was karmic, obviously, which most people deal with. And the other was to prove to myself how good of a healer I was. And it was my mentor in Bali who, the day it happened, she came into my field, and my higher self basically told her, it's already healed. Don't worry about me. I'm all good. Everything's great. And that was the day it happened, or the day after it happened. And I didn't know about that until I think she came and visited me in the hospital. But it was one of these limiting belief system lessons of how fast can you heal? Like what really is, what traits can we allow ourselves to experience? And essentially that this trauma was a massive catalyst for my own epigenetic process to cause my body to heal faster. And so since that's happened, my body has been able to heal very quickly from a number of different things. And in October, I've told you, but I'll share with everyone, I had my big toe basically crushed off. And I was able to heal from that pretty substantially within the first month or two. And even my doctor, who, he himself is a meditator, and very much, he was, a Western doctor with a lot of the Eastern and conscious, he's the most conscious doctor I've ever met, actually. But, he asked me, what am I doing? And I just kind of told him, and he said, I've told him especially the meditation, the visualization, the mantras, all of that. And he's like, I can't tell you to do anything else. Like you're doing everything you need, And so these situations have both been huge catalysts in rediscovering how solid of a healer I can be for myself. And then in that process, being grateful that I've chosen these life decisions of choosing to be very, very strict with my nutrition and very strict with the herbs and supplement investing. To me, health is wealth. So even when I was living in Southern California during the first couple of years of my awakening process, I had, next to nothing. I was living like a hermit. I was eating probably less than 500 to 1,000 calories a day. I was walking or taking buses, and I would still use $10 to buy one meal and snacks at a health food store than going to fast food and buying 10 meals or 8 meals. And it was always my mantra: health is wealth. And so that has really allowed me through this process and healing to really escalate how my biology, my quantum biology, responds to these kinds of things. And then also just the process of healing and eventually getting to a point where I'm manifesting my body in its optimal health, regardless of exterior, stimuli.
So I have a question. You mentioned this earlier, and thanks for sharing that, because like I said, people may go through different experiences, and they're going to have to accept that the belief system needs to be altered and worked on, but also really being conscious of what you're feeding your body and the processes that you use. I also use essential oils, and what you described was almost thieves oil. What you were putting on your injury to heal.
That combination of different.
The combinations, yeah,
right.
It's very, very similar. And we know that I'm a strong proponent of thieves oil. I've used it for many years, and 1 year my son had strep throat, but I was waiting for the doctors to confirm that he had strep throat. So I started using thieves oil right away. And 2 weeks later, by the time they get back to me now, he's well, he's fine.
Right.
And they confirmed that he has strep throat. So it actually healed strep throat.
Wow. That's amazing.
That was amazing. And I was pretty stunned by that, and realizing that, some of these things are at our fingertips. We underestimate their ability. But our body works excellent with anything that's growing in plants and so forth. But the mushroom stuff, I kind of stayed a little bit away from it because of the hallucinogenic effects. Right. But I do recall as a child, my father used to go out and get like wild mushrooms.
Right, foraging.
Foraging with some friends, I guess, and he would bring them back, and it's kind of I've been around people that have had wild mushrooms like that, you really need to know what you're doing, or it can
Yes.
be very life-threatening.
Right.
But I remember, we'd throw that penny in the water to make sure that there wasn't, I guess it would turn a certain way if there was some poison
Right.
involved.
Right.
But I remember sitting there eating wild mushrooms with them and just thinking I really liked them. And a lot of the different cultures, some of them really use mushrooms a lot, like the Chinese or Asian diets and
Right.
French. There's what is it called, a morel mushroom
Yep.
that's local to around the area in the
Right.
Midwest.
The
And
Slavic cultures are really big into it as well.
yeah. So, but I did want to point out that the cacao, the raw cacao, which you
Right.
have incorporated, and Peter has been bringing this up, and people are like, "Well, this is stupid," I even had someone contact me and say it was like I was harming people by telling them to have
Right.
cacao. Now, I'm not saying that this is you don't need to go to the doctor, just eat chocolate. You know what I mean? I'm not
Right.
saying that.
Right.
And anyone that twists that around and interprets it that way is absolutely incorrect. And but why Peter was saying that is it does something to alter the effect of the femto nanotech that is obviously we've been exposed to heavily, especially in the United States,
Right.
and it's in the water, in the air, in the chemtrails, and probably around the world, I would say. But I guess there was a strong concentration of it
Right.
in the U.S.
And what a lot of, I mean, what many, if not almost all people in our culture, Western quote unquote civilization, is what they don't know is that cacao in Central American, Mesoamerican, Native, and indigenous cultures is a sacred medicine. It is used in ceremony. It is used for weddings. It's used for funerals, used for births. It is, to the Mayans, it was the fruit of the gods. And I have experienced cacao ceremonies myself, and there is a massive, just like, just like ayahuasca, just like cannabis, just like magic mushrooms. This is a plant consciousness that is monumentally and astronomically intelligent and sentient. And when we have that kind of relationship um, with that plant, it offers you a lot more than the face value of the nutritional properties. And that being said, the nutritional properties are highly dependent on whether it's pure raw cacao or it's extremely processed cocoa, which is the polar opposite of cacao, other than having some of the taste factors. But cocoa is processed and roasted and pulverized and made and mixed with milk and sugar and etc. to make what we call chocolate. But cacao grows in these beautiful seed pods, and it's surrounded in when you break them open, it looks like an alien fruit. Honestly, it's very weird looking. When you break it open, the cacao beans are wrapped in this gooey, fibrous white film. And so, the process of extracting the cacao and keeping it raw is so important, because just like all of the other, nutritional topics that we've talked about, the microbiome that is growing on and within that food and feeding on that food it's absolutely necessary to the healing properties of the food. And on top of that, the antioxidants that cacao has are incredibly important to healing properties in of itself. And obviously, cacao is now known as a superfood, raw cacao, and that is because it has great bioavailable minerals. It has great antioxidants, and it's all honestly a really good coffee substitute. And in fact, the Mayan shamans have to use other herbs with cacao to counteract it because it's so powerful. They use like mucuna or lucuma and cinnamon and spices with it. And to create more of a balanced effect, because you can actually get addicted to cacao just like you can get addicted to coffee. And it's your body just being addicted to the cacao has something called theobromine, which is very similar to caffeine. It's very energetic, very powerful medicine. But I was actually listening to that response or that interview with Peter, and I found it really interesting that he mentioned cacao, and he couldn't say it because there was a language barrier to it. And I knew exactly right when he was talking, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's actually incredible. And I've been using it myself, and I've done ceremonies with it. It is a very powerful medicine. It's another mother medicine, another feminine consciousness. And specifically in cacao ceremony, it's a heart medicine. It's actually for opening the heart and expanding your field and grounding you. And so, you can have a little magic moment ceremony with your hot cocoa if you want it, or even eating it raw from, its chocolate form, or I mix it into smoothies to make sure that it stays raw. Because even if you're going to make hot cocoa, you want to boil the water and then let it cool to, around 100 degrees or so. I believe 110 or something is like when past 110 or 108 degrees Fahrenheit is when things officially do not become, they go from being raw to being cooked or having that kind of heat on it. And that has to do with the microbiome. And so if you do make it into hot chocolate, heat the water to a slow boil or whatever, and then let it cool a little bit before you put in the cacao powder. And that will be able to preserve some of the microbiome and, of course, the antioxidants that are really good for you.
That's very helpful, because I think that people don't realize, because of our society, everything's so sugar coated, that these are the things that are bad for us, and
right.
Actually, because of the processing and how we've managed food, it has literally negated the value of it, and not only nutritional but also healing properties to it.
Right.
Even with mushrooms, I know that mushrooms, they've discovered that certain mushrooms actually can get rid of, I don't know if it was nuclear waste or something like really crazy.
Right.
And so they know how to, the plants know how to transform some of these things into returning it back into its normal state. It's very, very intelligent. That the earth was created to self-sustain, and if you remove, there's like an area, I don't want to say remove humans, but if there's nothing really living here, there's just plants. It just keeps on, restoring itself, but it's still doing that now.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we would, you'd see the huge breakdown. Although, we are struggling. We need to be mindful of it. And this is our consciousness, right, and our interplay with the earth itself, and right, trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong, and how are we managing this together, and the symbiosis of our connectedness here. This is a great time to reinstate yourself as a part of the planet, and align with that, and that also will create another form of protection, and the plants will also respond well, right, to your body. So you will not be away from in conflict or and opposed to anything that's living, because it literally will react to your body in that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because they're alive, they're conscious.
Right.
And so,
right.
Thank you for explaining that, because I know that so some people like to laugh about suggestions because it's too simple. So they want us to say, well, you need to go to a scientist, and they're going to formulate a bunch of elements, and then some of these all of these different things that happen in the lab is going to cure us. And so we've been so indoctrinated with this belief system that if someone says, hey, this plant right here that's growing in your front yard could actually help you,
Right.
and people laugh. They think it's a
Right.
joke. What's wrong with our society that we can't accept that something natural and living is better for us than chemicals? So it's strong mind control and mind manipulation of what's going on. And the same thing with mint tea. I mean, what are the properties of mint tea? It's it's an herb.
Right.
Peter talks about the mint tea with lemon and cinnamon, and like you talked about chocolate and adding cinnamon, and it's the same thing. It's just a bunch of plants coming together, but they are powerful because we underestimate what's living and what its capabilities of healing us and restoring some of the things that we need. It actually works on our auric field as well, because that's where they get that whole Bach essence in the teaching of using plant, the essence of the plant,
Right.
or flower essences,
Right.
and then applying that to your body. It helps your aura.
Exactly. And it's not digestion, but the interface of you and the plant starts in the aura. And so if you're saying a prayer in gratitude to the plant and consciously connecting to it, I feel there's a much deeper capacity for that plant to help you in your healing process than just taking a pill, or just, and that has to do even with your food and just wolfing your food down. There's you have to be, your body itself has to be ready to even receive nutrients and digest. And even stress and these other factors actually reduce the body's ability to metabolize nutrients. And so utilizing, being present and conscious while you're eating and smelling your food, especially smelling your food, is so important. How interconnected your senses are in your body, smelling what it's about to take in. And it's all part of it. And the intention part, with cacao, is something I wanted to mention with one of the other things Peter was talking about, which was phoenix tears. And phoenix tears is another name for Rick Simpson oil. And Rick Simpson oil is even a do-it-yourself, do-at-home possible extraction method for cannabis and hemp. Hemp is cannabis; it's just a different cousin. But the utilization of cannabis in our culture has been so bastardized, and has been and tobacco. I mean, tobacco is sacred in many cultures, and cannabis sacred and ceremonial in many cultures, including the Egyptians, including the Gnostic traditions. This is an extremely powerful consciousness and a plant that has been around, again, longer than we have. And when you utilize it and interface with it on a conscious level, the capacity for it helping is, I feel, much greater, because there's not a giving and taking. There is a offering and receiving, and there's a reciprocity to it, where cannabis, most people smoke cannabis to, just like they would taking shots. They're trying to escape whatever internal feelings that they're not wanting to face, and they're wanting to escape the rough situations they may be in their life. They're literally trying to escape the pain that they're in, including physical pain. But Phoenix Tears, this Rick Simpson oil, is something that I believe you and I might have spoken about it. But this is a kind of medicine that people will literally move their entire families into states like Colorado, where cannabis is legal, to utilize Rick Simpson oil for the treatment of many different distortions to physical health. And the endocannabinoid system in your body is is a biological system that, if it's surprising to me how new this is in modern science, and our doctors being so, not privy to what this does, because the endocannabinoid system spans across all, if not, most, if not all of the actual biological systems in your body. So you have them in your respiratory, your neurological, your digestion, your, circulatory system. It's this hybrid system that allows your body to communicate in between systems. And so given that our modern culture, I would say, is cannabinoid deficient, meaning we do not have cannabinoids often in our food or in our medicine. And therefore our endocannabinoid system, because the endocannabinoid part is is inner. So our body does create its own cannabinoids. And however, these external cannabinoids are very supportive to us being in balance. And so the combination of knowing how crucial this is to an entire system of our biology, and being respectful enough to the plant to communicate with her and ask her for support and ask her for, the healing that you need or want, I feel is something that a lot of people don't know. And it took me to experience ayahuasca ceremonies, sitting with Peruvian shamans, and sitting with real interaction with plant medicine consciousness to fully understand this. And it's been, I don't smoke anymore or anything, but even then, even when I would pray like every time, even if I was in a group and had to awkwardly do it because everyone else just wanted to get high. I was the person that would hold the joint or whatever and hold it in my hand and close my eyes and pray, because it is a extremely powerful medicine. And so for people to utilize it now in this time, I don't think science is willing to acknowledge that cannabinoids can be as supportive in a antiviral situation. There are studies that prove that cannabinoids may have antibacterial or antifungal or antiviral properties. However, it's more than that. It's about utilizing natural medicines and traditional medicines that are going to support your entire biology, so that in the case of you getting a virus, then your body is way more than well equipped to handle this. And I feel that people that are not immunocompromised can very easily have these, minor cases of this coronavirus or influenza or whatever, have little to no symptoms and really shake this off. But it's the people that have, completely compromised their immune system that are having a really big issue with this. So I think utilizing as many tools as we can, and I like how you call it a toolbox. I call it the Batman utility belt, just having all of these tools to just quick draw, just whatever it is. And this is all, it's all very important right now. I think there's a, major collective healing crisis going on, that is very important for people are coming to the terms that, yes, I've been mistreating my body, and yes, maybe I wouldn't even be fearing this coronavirus if I actually had an immune system that worked and wasn't, still riding on training wheels from flu shots every year.
Right. And so I'm going to ask, there's another key problem that we're contending right now, and this is the 5G.
Right.
Weaponized, the military grade 5G that Peter was referring to, that can be highly detrimental. And you and I talked about this yesterday.
Right.
You said to use, I don't know if it was something related to Rife or some kind of, what was it?
There's definitely different scalar. A lot of people are using different kinds of scalar technologies, and using the transmutation abilities of certain I know many people are probably going to laugh about this, but crystals. There are crystals like shungite and like black tourmaline that have, very impressive metaphysical properties, and they like to,
Oregon.
and yeah, they like to use that to create orgonite, and orgonite is a orgone energy was kind of really dubbed by Wilhelm Reich, and he was another gentleman who was um, he was actually a student of Freud, which I find hilarious, and he is from Western Europe, I believe, Germany or Austria, and he was another guy who had his doors kicked down by the FDA and all of his stuff removed and his books burned. And they don't do that to people that are frauds. They'll arrest them and humiliate them, but they will literally destroy your information if you're opposing their general narrative of what energy or what health is. And orgonite basically utilizes something that Wilhelm Reich discovered, is if you have concentric layers of organic and non-organic materials, that it interacts with what he called orgone energy, which is something we know commonly as chi or prana or life force energy. He called it orgone, which was tied in and a root from the word orgasm, because he believed that the entire universe was in organic, creative bliss and capacity, and that the orgasm was essentially that embodiment of a human body and soul aligning with that energy that's just constant. I mean, if you think of just the microbiome and everything that's around us, that is constantly procreating and making love with itself and each other, and all of these things, that this was something that he was really fascinated by. And his studies were based on, a lot of trials where he would have people come in and they had different, in psychology, they're called neuroses, basically different psychological or emotional distortions. And from his work, he, pretty much summed up that people are deprived of, the essential bioelectric energy that is around us in our natural environment. And when people are starved of that, that's when we start having health issues. It's basically when we're cut off from life force energy, our body will start degrading and our cellular function and even our cellular replication and DNA will start degrading. And so he developed these rooms and these boxes that people would sit in. And now they've basically taken that same technology and made it into orgone pendants that utilize that combination of accumulating life force energy into a concentrated area, and that ambient energy having the ability to help biological processes realign to their optimal function. And yeah, so they combine that with certain metaphysical properties of crystals to transmute ambient electromagnetic energy. And there's another company also called Blue Shield, which I've recently remembered. I had a friend of mine who's a huge. She's gone way deeper on the rabbit hole of nutrition and metaphysical, quantum biology, so to say, that I have. She's a huge, and her and I, weirdly enough, have the same birthday and are the same person in different bodies, which is hilarious. And she introduced me to a company called Blue Shield. And so Blue Shield uses scalar technology, and scalar is just a different kind of pulse, different kind of radiation to help the body basically adapt to being in an electromagnetic environment. And what they talk about is the body has a natural immuno response to EMFs, harmful EMFs that cause us to have the health issues that end up kind of snowballing into that. And so the technology that they use, they claim that helps the body reprogram itself so that it doesn't go into that self-destructive and immuno dysfunction from the EMF, and basically it helps your body become resilient to it. And this is something that myself and my roommates and even my partner have all talked about, is that nature, prime creator consciousness always allows and causes itself to adapt and to grow more resilient in every single environment that it's a part of. For example, the mushrooms you have a mycelial network that's one cell wall thick that stretches across miles, and it's in contact literally every square inch with millions of bacteria, germs, pathogens, etc., and is at a moment-to-moment basis constantly shifting and mutating its genetics to create enzymes to take out pathogens, take out harmful bacteria, and propagate and allow these communities of symbiotic bacteria to exist. So our bodies are very capable of similar things, where we are able to epigenetically shift and express higher forms of health and well-being. And I believe the expansion of consciousness is all part of that. And through the expansion of what a lot of people call the light quotient, which is basically the quality and magnitude of light that each cell in your body is able to retain and be within. As that light quotient in your body continues to raise in consciousness, you become more and more resilient and more immune. And this in turn also allows people to live longer and have, greater health and well-being overall. And so I feel that I refuse to believe that 5G is going to stick around long. I believe the momentum on it, even in the scientific community, is pretty overwhelming, and it's going to be something that is continuously halted. And new technology will need to be created that's symbiotic to biology on a quantum level. However, it is in the meantime an opportunity for us to raise our consciousness and know that our consciousness and the magnitude of our beingness is far greater than any kind of technology could ever replicate or create in of itself. And so I feel the more we're able to expand our field and intentionally program our field to transmute it, because we have you could call it a force field around us, that if we can continually take command of our body, take command of our energetic bodies, that our energetic bodies can then become stronger and transmute that energy before it even comes close to our body. There's almost like the atmosphere protecting the planet. We have our own atmosphere that we can develop that will protect our cellular biology and the inner layers of our field from being damaged by electromagnetic distortions.
And that goes for whether it's COVID-19 or any variation of whether that was SARS, HIV, all of these other things, which people, become so frightened. They think that there's no way out. We don't have a remedy. Well, there are people that have survived. The medical community doesn't really inform us when there are these successes. They only tell us about the losses. Right. And because it's based on money. It's the any types of shots or any types of intentions of medicines and so forth. A lot of this there's a lot of money to be gained, and I hate to say it, but we just need to grow up and deal with the truth of the matter. Right. And so, if there's no way to profit off of us, then, they're not going to be happy. But we really have to look out for ourselves. Yeah. And so stop, looking with, in a naive way, expecting the best intentions from those that, have a weakness with money.
Right.
And especially
Absolutely.
billionaires like Bill Gates and some of these others that just they can't help themselves.
Right.
They just need to be on top. They need to have the most, of
Right.
whatever that is because of the greatest void that they probably have. But anyhow, that's a whole other topic, and I don't want to taint this very important conversation because this is where we need to stay focused,
Right.
and not to say that we don't, speak out, which I think is vitally important, but that's for another show.
Right.
But for right now, you can't do anything unless you're well and strong, and I want everyone
Right.
that's listening to be well and strong and really take in this information. If it feels overwhelming, take pieces of it and just start implementing that into your lifestyle, and then gradually pull in more that deals with your own physiology and how you can make yourself stronger and more resilient, and provide clarity in whatever it is that you need to support your system.
Right.
So
One
working.
one
Oh,
one thing I want to add about the kind of involving the mindset, the perspective of what's happening. It was something that, I for years was battling this. It felt like um, I mean, it wasn't necessarily hopelessness, but it was almost like overwhelmment of thinking that about the, quote unquote forces, the cabal that's against human life and all life for that matter. And a couple of years ago, I had my guidance come through and, really reaffirm this for me. And it was a huge limiting belief system that was shattered, pretty much within a day. And it had to do with realizing that, from our ego's perspective, the forces that may be attempting to control, oppress, and distort consciousness, freedom, free will, etc., may seem, incredibly daunting. Um, but on a collective level, from our higher perspective, this is a very small amount of people in contrast to the general population of both the planet and the solar system and the galaxy, etc., that are attempting to resist and hold back a function of the entire all of creation. And this is a absolutely futile task in their part. This is something that they have already lost, even thinking that they could stop consciousness from expanding and stopping the prime creator itself from embodying fully through all of life on this planet, and stopping this planet, which has her own free will and her own sovereign choice and absolutely monumental power, that these people have no chance to really affect us on a collective level unless we allow it. And that limiting belief system is something that is paramount in our reality and our perception. And the reference or the image that I was given in this message from my true guides was their attempt to resist the evolution and awakening of all of life and consciousness is like trying to hold back the tide of the ocean with a sandcastle. And so that is literally how futile all of this is. And so we are incredibly powerful beings, and especially humans create on a collective level. And the more that we can join together and come together and put intention together, that we can really shift this very quickly. And it's going to shift regardless. I know that. And it's not just groups that, Peter's working with that are helping with this process. There are many of us, again, that chose to be here in this space and time as system busters and to literally create entirely new realities and from the inside out. And I believe that's what we're doing. And so, again, to just reaffirm that when you, in contrast to all of creation, these people, X amount of, 1% of the population of this planet really does not have any power even collectively speaking, or, in any of the other capacities that they do. And that is the ultimate fear that they fear us realizing. And that is why they're doing everything they can to claw tooth and nail for the illusion of control, because they actually don't have control.
No, I agree that they don't. And like you said, it's a small population, although they have powers behind them
Right.
that need to be disabled, to be honest with you. And I tell everyone, they think they're just going to grab these people because they're in the body now, but they can step out. These are astral beings. And so you need to know that's where you need the people with psionic ability to be able to deal with and take back, some of the power that they've taken from us. And remember, they've been looshing off of the most powerful beings that we have on this planet, and these are the children. The children come in with incredible life force. They've just been with this divine space, and they come in with this, and they've been harvesting off of that, and all of the innocent, and so and animals and so forth. And so this they've gained a lot of astral power. However, that we ourselves have to be strong. Those that are doing psionic work, to be able to remove some of these power systems that they have and loosen up everything so humans could then take back everything. I mean, it defies logic how only a handful can control the planet. But yet, if you actually see what they have, you realize that they have quite an arsenal that we haven't understood, but I could see it. And I have been seeing it for a while, and this is what brought me in the situation that I'm in right now, is to help teach people to incorporate their own abilities for why they're here and what they're supposed to do. And so, you and I were talking about, I had my lifetime in this angelic realm. I've had many different experiences, and I've been with many different civilizations. That's why I've had so many different, encounters with different things, and the ACIO is interested in what I do. So my recall, we had this discussion a few days ago, is my recall of being in the angelic realm, which is a protector energy, technically, originally. And so I remember being in this great, enormous cave-like system. And not like we're hiding in a cave, but it was just this incredible place where we were all convening, and all the kind of having like a male energy, all the angels being somewhat male, and standing there and listening to someone like on a throne, right? So like a king or a leader or whatever you want to call it God, you call it God, but and I remember the echoing. It was like a voice of many voices. You know what I mean? It was like not just an echo in a building, but it was like a very, very. It's one of those voices that you'll never forget.
Right.
And
It's like a collective consciousness speaking to you.
yeah, and it had a sort of resonance about it that was very commanding, but not cruel. But I think at one point they said you have to realize that there's a problem. A good portion of you have been infected, and you're going to have to take sides, because they knew that something had happened. And I remember standing there and looking at this sea of angels, or you want to call them beings, and turning to my right, and then a large group of them, like half the group on the side of me, turned and looked at me, and they had red eyes. And I'll never forget that. And I'm like, whoa, there's something wrong. But I said, before that happened, I said inside myself, I will never turn on one of my brothers. Because like I was being told, we have to take a side. And I said, I won't. Right? Which got me in trouble, which I'm always still in trouble. But I remember half of them turned and looked at me with red eyes, and I was like, all right, that's not normal. Right?
Right.
And then I see myself in this other space. It just like a snap of a finger. Now I'm transported to this other space, and they said, "You realize you chose the ones that were untainted, and then the others that were tainted. You didn't choose either one, so that puts you on the outskirts. You're not protected." And I find that throughout my many lifetimes, I realized this, that I was essentially at odds with both groups. You know, those that are portraying to be the good ones, those that are portraying to be the fallen ones, and they all recognize me.
Right.
And I've had conflicts with them throughout my life, and the good ones saying that I'm bad, the bad ones trying to make my life miserable. And so it's just been until I, recognized what had happened, and I had this realization and full out memory of it, probably about 10, maybe 12, 10 to 12 years ago. And so I'm sitting here thinking about all this stuff, and now I hadn't thought about this for a long time. And of course, we get this virus and everything, and I have a vision. Now I'm standing by the cave, but it's more on the outside, and there's a few different angels there, and they're looking at me. And I said, and I realized at that moment there's these bats. Instead of divine beings being inside the cave, it's all these bats. And I realized that there was something had happened, and actually this COVID was almost like it happened already in the angelic realm. And it was this, I know Peter talks about COVID originally starting with the snakes, but I see it as bat. And at some point, the bat is involved in this, in the bat, whatever bacteria or whatever came out of the bat, the pathogen or whatever you want to call it. And I saw that the angels were originally affected by that. But not all of them wanted to persist in this way. And I don't doubt that this was where this vampire thing came from. But that having that realization of what was going on at the time, and I thought, well, wasn't that unfortunate that it actually altered their state of mind? And I'm wondering how COVID, those that survive it, is this going to affect them in also a negative way? Because this is a trickle-down effect, or as it is above, so it is below. So this is another dimensional space where this occurred. And it was like an infection. But I remember for years trying to figure out what was that, and it didn't click until I saw that cave again and realized it. And and believe it or not, I saw Jared Leto there. Right. And we talked about these seraphims and archangels and so forth, and some of them were there. And I remember I had an argument with a few of them while I was standing there, because I do. It's what I do, and some people don't like it, but I disagree, and I explain why, and of course, they explain why they disagree with me, and then we get to whatever point that needs to come to, but I just thought, and then of course that whole connection with Jared Leto in that movie that he's playing in with Morbius, where he actually is standing, because my mind immediately went to that trailer where I saw him standing by this place where, like a cave or something, and all of these bats came toward him and bit him, which created this whole monster mutant effect. Yeah, this monster, and it's essentially what the angels, maybe not exactly in that way, but essentially that's what happened, which created that. Would call them fallen, but maybe more infected. And so I saw you in a different light this past time, where they told me that some of the fallen angels showed up, and this is going to be, some people are going to get upset about this, but some of them showed up and they said, "We have kept ourselves in self-quarantine all this time. We would like to have some help." And they knew that you would have a remedy for them. And you put together three combination tonics. Right. And they immediately chose one of them and I told you about it. I had no idea what was in any of them. What was interesting is there was cacao in the one that I chose, that they told me that was the one that worked for them.
Right.
And so I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing with people in case this may be leading to something that will help people.
Yeah, definitely. Let me bring out the mixtures. So that one had a company called Himalaya Herbs. They have a product called ImmunoCare, and it's a pretty extensive, very wide variety of immune boosting herbs and healing herbs. Himalayan Herbs is a Indian company. They use a lot of the Ayurvedic medicine and that kind of herbs in their products and make it palatable for the white folk that don't want to get into the Vedas and into the not just the white folk, I apologize, but just people that do not want to get into Vedic and Ayurvedic information. And then it also had raw cacao, and it had zinc in it. And so, this one was, a really powerful combination. I've been using that ImmunoCare as well. The other ones had, other very powerful natural medicines as well. A lot of them were mushroom extract base. One of them had pure organic saffron in it, which also has great antioxidants. And one of the other ones also had bee propolis, which is a fantastic booster for the immune system and supporting the body. And then one of them also had colloidal minerals. And so I was kind of, I thought it was interesting that they came to me to, I've had, some pretty intense run-ins, and especially since I started awakening with fallen angels and with beings that that we could be considered may have been infected. What you had mentioned about them in the cave and those being affected was very similar to other things that I had felt or things that I had read and heard of specific guardian collective consciousness and individuals or emanations of that collective consciousness getting infected by things like artificial intelligence, and it being almost like a virus and causing distortions and causing even a lot of people draw that back to the Luciferian rebellion of the angels, or to different other interstellar cultures and different creator gods kind of falling from grace and getting infected and creating things out of malice and greed and hatred, etc., because they were ultimately inflicted by this AI. Artificial intelligence does not have the capacity to create. It does not have free will. It does not have creative capacity. So it needs to utilize organic prime creator consciousness or emanations of the prime creator to create. And that, of course, is tricky situations, I can imagine, when you're, angelics and higher dimensional beings. So, I have been banishing beings for close to 7 years, being attacked in my dream space and coming back into my body and being slammed against my bed and, being growled at and snarled at and, having to call in, my true soul lineage and my higher principle to clear the room and banish those beings and etc. So it was an interesting exercise in compassion to not immediately just think of banishing them, because that's my old self. And that is, again, that's coming from the parts of me that have been abducted and abused and used and hurt on different dimensions, and including this one. And so I thought it was an interesting opportunity, and I'm really happy that they were able to find that each of those mixtures were beneficial, but the one specifically, I had them basically lettered A, B, and C. And so when you said the third one, I immediately thought of C, and that was the one with the rock cow in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was like in a nanosecond. I just said, all right, I'm looking at the different elixirs that you created, and I just said, all right, so you tell me which one it is. Immediately, it was the third one, and I had no idea. You didn't give me a description of any of them, but it makes sense. It's pretty much what people have been talking about, especially even the zinc was interesting. That's something else. So now that so it's the boosting of the immune system, the rock cacao, and the zinc, which is I don't know, was it help with I think sort of like what Trump was talking about was they used that with the tonic water. I think that was one of the remedies that people put out there too, because people have made fun of, oh, you use to this, some of the different things regarding how to protect yourself, and how to if you get sick, this is what you do, because there was a huge vacuum of no information at all. And they were not giving any remedies. They keep on talking about vaccines. And so meanwhile, when people are sick, they're sick. So somebody has to come up with some ideas. And so people are just, looking for different reasons, keeping the internal part of the nose warm, drinking hot things seemed to work for people. People laughed about it afterwards, but it doesn't really matter. You do the best that you can with the tools that you have, and that's why we build up our toolbox in these discussions. But it is coming down to that intuitively putting this all together, me not knowing the combinations that you made, and all three of them sound brilliant, regarding enhancement of immune system, getting people healthy. But then they told me, they said that the other two were very good, but for other things. They said that there'll be other reasons why the other two were going to be very good. But for this particular problem that they had, that was the one that they needed, and it helped them immediately. Now you probably say, well, they didn't physically drink it. Well, everything's energy.
Exactly.
So you put together the life force of all these plant energies together to create this energy that they were able to take on. And also, it was through your own creative knowing that you were able to find the right combination. Another thing before we finish this conversation, I want to say that that Kyle, that you were brought in through special projects. And I saw you, and they used you to heal humans that were unhealable. Let me give you an example. The people Peter talks about this whole Chernobyl incident and how there were some people that were not as affected as others, that actually the radiation didn't bother them at all.
Right.
And I think it was like, I don't know if you want to call it Nazi party or some of these extreme groups that were, using the super soldiers for different things. They were, or it was a Rush. I can't remember which one, or maybe it's not my place to say which one it was because it's your personal information. But either way, the issue is they were using these men. I didn't see any females, but there could have been some females there. They were using them to go into extreme circumstances, pushing their bodies to a limit and see who would survive. And that's where we got the whole Ubermensch thing, where, these are supposed to be the elite of the elite and see what they could handle, right?
Right.
And some of them, still had difficulties because they're still in physical form, and also levels of subconscious realizations of, that fear of what can kill somebody, what cannot. And so you were the ones that, you were one of the doctors there that was able to help these people get through. And so, and obviously the angels knew that about you, but also the special projects knew that about you as well. So now, guess what? We're privileged to have you help us figure out some of this stuff, because you've done it in so many other areas. And I'm grateful that you're here, and I'm grateful that there's going to be many others that are going to come forward, and they're going to help the population to figure out certain things in the absence of remedies or problems, the things that arise, because for us, it's not about money. It's understanding the intrinsic value of human life, and that everyone deserves an opportunity to thrive and survive. And so that's why we do this.
Right, absolutely. It's all part of our purpose. And, again, you could be a, thought leader of the world, you could be a tailor, you could be a janitor, and, each of us have equal, equity and position in the heart of the Creator in what we're doing here. And there's everybody's fulfilling their roles, whether they know it or not. And the more that we can align to our purpose and choose to step into our true purpose, that's when we really start seeing ourselves being supported on all levels. And that's, the more, another thing before we finish, another thing that I've been really calling in to support me and support humanity is, we have layers of ancestry. We have our, human ancestors, our true ancestors that are from our human soul or human lineage in this life. But we also have our, true soul lineage, which spans across soul groups and other planets and systems and etc. And so the more we call in our true ancestors and our true soul lineage to support us, the more I feel we gain momentum on not just the physical level, but on the astral and metaphysical levels as well. And the more our arsenal, continues to grow, because there is even with our guides, even though they're choosing and assigned to work with us, they still need our free will, because they're abiding by the law of free will, general universal principles. The more we utilize our free will to allow that support, the more it can happen. And, I would just emphasize, to me, it's very important to emphasize on your true ancestors and your true soul lineage, because that specific intention and will is very powerful, and it disallows any other beings that may be around you or maybe around you on other dimensions from coming in and posing as your guides, or posing as, as basically as an imposter, and will disallow that. And so that's just, that's all I just wanted to share for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, this has been a lot of great information. And we're asking that, our abilities are being used for the highest good, that we are no longer in any type of system that is requiring that we be used to do the work of harming others, and to be in a situation where we're kind of, getting preoccupied in things that are not beneficial to ourselves or those around us, and to reset, take back all that's yours, and to and be self-empowered and embrace life as you should, and seeing that nothing is too difficult for you at this time.
Right.
So with that said, Kyle, thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope that you'll come back again, maybe give us an update, and maybe we'll get to another phase whatever it is that we need and keep moving forward.
Right. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be on your show, and really, really excited to share this information and for everyone to continue taking responsibility and standing up and stepping into their purpose and who they're meant to be in this world.
And thank you everyone for listening. Have a great day. Stay well, stay strong, and let's keep moving forward.
You have been listening to Androna Talks Radio. Join us on YouTube channel Jessica Ariel Morocco and visit her website at www.readingsbyariel.com.